Today we're going to checkmate the enemy king with a queen and a bishop. And first we got to figure out where we want that checkmate to happen. Personally, I prefer to do it in the corner of the same color your bishop is on. That means that we are going to force the enemy king to one of these two squares with the queen, and then we're going to checkmate the king with our queen here and the support of the bishop somewhere along this diagonal. Forcing the king to that corner we have covered in many tutorials, so we're not going to go through that part. But when the king comes towards you, you're going to have a waiting move, because you do not want to move your queen, and that will be the bishop. But here you got to remember, if we move the bishop here as a waiting move, we do put the enemy king in check. But the problem here is that we are pointing right towards the two squares where we want the king, and that could possibly cause a stalemate, so we don't want to do that. So we're just going to move our bishop here as a waiting move, and the king has to move back somewhere, otherwise it will be in automatic check by the queen, and then we just follow. Just one step at a time, and sooner or later we will force that enemy king into that corner. And in speed chess, I think this is the easiest way to do it. Now we gotta remember, the king only has one place to move, which is here, and we cannot follow, right? Because if we follow, it will be a stalemate. Alright, let me explain that. If you do not put the king in checkmate, it has to have two places to move back and forth and back and forth, otherwise it will be a stalemate, right? So the king needs to have these two squares to move on. If we do move the queen here, the king is automatically in stalemate, because it can't move here, here, or here, right? When we first started here, we thought of placing our bishop here as a waiting move. Now you see the reason why we didn't do that, because if we had placed the bishop here as a waiting move, that bishop would have covered that corner square, making this right now a stalemate. And that's why we don't want the bishop to be anywhere near those squares before the complete end. So the king moves into the corner, and we check him with the bishop. And by doing that, we're also supporting the queen. The king moves back, the only place it can move, and we checkmate. And you see, the king cannot take the queen because of the support of the bishop here, and that is a checkmate. With the white squared bishop, you'd ideally want to have him in this corner, but let's say you end up with this corner anyway. Let's see how that plays out. We're not going to go through the whole chasing of the king here, just up to the waiting move. Now you're going to see this is a little bit different, because it all depends on where the king is. Now the king is in the move, and it's going to move into the corner. You're going to put your bishop into support. The king is going to move the only square it can, and this is not a checkmate. The king can move away. Planning, planning, planning. The only way we're going to pull this off is if the king is in that corner during the checkmate. It's the king's move. He's going to move into the corner. We're going to move the bishop here in support. The king is going to move here, only place he can move. And then we're going to use a waiting move again. We're just going to move the bishop here, for example. The king has one place to move. And we can either checkmate by moving here, that's a checkmate, or we could move the queen here and say checkmate, because the king cannot move here because it's covered by the bishop. So you can checkmate in both corners, but I personally prefer to checkmate in the corner where your bishop dominates.